Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight, and welcome to the Energy Storage Solutions introductory webinar uh, for homeowners. And so my name is Ed Kranich with the Connecticut Green Bank. I'm a Senior Manager of Incentive Programs. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Emma Saavedra, Associate Manager of Incentive Programs with the Green Bank, and Rudy Stirk, Associate Director of Marketing. So we're excited to give a presentation and overview on energy storage solutions to everyone out there. So without much further ado, we'll get started. So next slide, please. All right, so on to the agenda for this evening. So we will start with an overview of the Energy Storage Solutions Program, followed by specifics for residential incentives, including costs and benefits and how to get started. And we'll talk a little bit about why batteries to start with, for backup, for serving the grid. And then we'll go on to how to get started, and we'll take any questions. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the question box. Get them in early, as they come up, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. If there's anything, pressing, you lose audio or video or something like that, also feel free to send that in as well. So, all right, next slide, please. So what is energy storage? So energy storage comes in many forms. Our laptops and phones and cars all have batteries, of course, which is a form of energy storage. Your water heater is a form of energy storage in that it heats up the water now and it stores it in the tank to use later. So that's heat energy being stored. So even the gas tank in your car is considered a form of energy storage. The fuel, the gasoline or diesel that you use, takes energy to create that, and it becomes a portable source of energy to put in your car and run your engine on. So kind of in that same vein there, large grid scale energy projects, energy storage projects, can even come in the form of massive underground caverns filled with compressed air or water that's pumped from one location uphill to another and then run through a hydroelectric dam when needed. But why do we do this? So the reason is because we want to store energy that's generated now when it's either easier or cheaper to do, or the resource is more plentiful, and then use it later when it may not be as easy to obtain that energy. So in the form of, like I said previously, the water that's pumped from a storage tank or from a pond uphill into another pond, that's done when energy is plentiful and it's easy to access, it's cheap, and then you can run it through a hydroelectric dam when it's more expensive or it's more scarce. So again, why do we want to do this in Connecticut, and why now? So next slide, please. So why was Energy Storage Solutions created? So the way that we use energy, everyone uses energy, is not constant. We wake up, we turn the lights on, we go to work, go to school. As our daily activities and productivity increases, that puts a strain on the grid. So I have an article here from over the summer. Some of you may remember Texas was in the news several times for their grid being kind of on the brink of a real emergency, again, actually. And in that case, it's because there was extreme heat in Texas, and there were, really hot days, really humid days. Everyone was inside, everyone was running their air conditioners. And there was actually a point where the grid operators in Texas were concerned that there actually just would not be enough generators on their grid to meet the demand. And they would have to shut down circuits and do rolling blackouts to actually meet that demand, because there was just too much load on the grid and there weren't enough generators to supply it. So they had asked people, please, shut off your lights, don't run appliances at this hour. And that did work to some extent. But if we go to the next slide here, I'll explain kind of how Energy Storage Solutions is designed to kind of meet that. So this chart here isn't really specific to Connecticut, it's not exact, but it shows the basics of where our power comes from. So at the bottom, we have baseload power, which in Connecticut oftentimes is nuclear. Nuclear doesn't release CO2 and noxious fumes the same way that other fossil fuels do, or that fossil fuels do, because it's not a fossil fuel. And then next, up in the orange section of this chart, we have intermediate, which in Connecticut, again, is mostly natural gas. And then up at the top, where it says fast peaking with all those dollar signs and it's in red, that is, those are fast peaking plants, which most often are the dirtiest form of energy. They can often just be run on kerosene oil. They don't run very often, and they're very expensive to run. So there are some times where there are power plants that fire up for these peak events, usually on very, very hot summer days, and they run for maybe even just a couple hours a year, or a couple hours a day for a few days a year, and they make power very expensive for everyone. So ESS, Energy Storage Solutions, was created to use energy more intelligently by charging batteries with either solar power, for a lot of you out there, a lot of solar customers, or with baseload or cheaper, cleaner forms of energy, and then discharging at those peak times instead of firing up dirty peaker power plants on those hot summer days or very cold winter days. So next slide, please. So when we're talking about battery energy storage here, this is what we're talking about. These types of batteries that these days, they look very slick. They look nice in your garage. So some of you familiar with off-grid solar PV or backup power from a decade or more ago might think of these big banks of deep cycle lead acid batteries, essentially just car or marine batteries in a big array in your garage. They have to have ventilation, they have fumes, they need to be cooled. Today's technology is much smarter, much lower physical footprint, and it requires much less maintenance. These are batteries from companies that are in the solar world already, like Enphase, Generac, SunPower, SolarEdge, companies like that. So you may recognize some of those names from the solar world, or you may recognize Generac. They're a pretty big name in the world of backup power. So next slide here. So just to be clear, what isn't battery storage? So these are technologies that we're not talking about here. So these are things that wouldn't qualify in energy storage solutions. That's things like uninterruptible power supplies. These things like in the middle here, it's basically a car battery that's made to power your sump pump when the power goes out. And then, small or off-grid PV systems that aren't grid connected. Typically, they don't come with lithium batteries, but even if they do, if it's not grid interactive, then it wouldn't qualify for this program. So it's got to be something that's constantly grid connected. It can be connected with or without solar panels. And it has to be an approved technology that's on our list. We have some more info on that towards the end of the slideshow. And it has to have software connectivity that can talk to our platform, where we can have some control over the battery, which I'll get to later on. So next slide, please. So now that we've established kind of why we launched this program and what types of energy storage we're talking about and not talking about, let's get into why we're all here tonight. So you're all wondering what battery storage can do for you. So first, and probably the main reason why anyone is here tonight, is that it provides resiliency. So there's a very personal reason, and it varies for everyone. Personally, I don't need much when it comes to backup power. I just need to charge my phone and keep some lights running, but other people have big families, medical needs, or they need to keep appliances running. You need to power electronics for work that you can't miss, keep medication refrigerated, things like that. So resiliency is really the main reason why people, why homeowners install batteries at their homes. Typically, it's paired with solar PV. Because when you're doing that, you have not only a source of backup power that you can pull from when the grid goes down, but you have a way to recharge it with solar panels, and that doesn't require any fuel or any other input than what's already on your roof. So next, many of you probably already have solar PV installed, and batteries are a great way of pairing it with PV, as I just mentioned. So you can recharge your batteries during an outage with your panels. And you can also charge your battery with PV and use it yourself. So it won't take you completely off the grid. You'll still be connected to the grid, which means you'll keep whatever net metering you have or incentives or anything like that, any tariff that you're currently receiving from the utility company. But it makes you a little bit more self-sufficient, especially in the event of an outage. In most cases, when the grid's not down, you really won't notice anything different. Third, and this only applies to customers who have a time of use rate, which in Connecticut isn't really that popular. Oh, actually, could you go back one slide, please? It's slide 10, thank you. Most residential customers in Connecticut don't have a time of use rate, but if you do, I know that there are some who do, you can charge up your battery at night from the grid, or you can charge it from solar PV during the day, and you can discharge it when electricity is more expensive. So if you're on a time of use rate, you'll pay more or less for energy depending on when you use it. And if you have that kind of an arrangement, then you can use that battery to kind of more intelligently use power so that you can charge the battery when power is cheapest for you, and you can discharge it when it's more expensive and when you need it. It's called time shifting. And again, it's not too common in Connecticut. There's other states like California have many more customers on time of use rates. But those customers, if you have it in Connecticut, you can benefit. And who knows, it could be something coming down the road from the utilities in the future. And finally, battery energy storage. It's a great idea because if the alternative is a generator doesn't pay you back. So we'll get to incentives in a moment. But next slide, we will get into what can battery storage power. So what can they power? If you have enough of them, pretty much anything. For most of us who will install, a couple of battery packs, in kind of that, under $40,000 range of cost, 10 to 30 kilowatt hours of energy, you'll want to consider the loads in your house using a chart like this one. In this example, we have the low demand essentials, such as lighting, fans, and small electronics in your fridge. And you can power these comfortably with a small battery system. So it's a good idea to make a list of what's absolutely essential to you in an outage, and make a list of what's nice to have, and set your expectations and budget based on that. Emphasis on budget, because as I said, the sky's the limit with what you can do with batteries, but it can get very expensive. So way over on the bottom right, in the high demand but nice to have, we have things like central air conditioning and a clothes dryer. These items use a lot of energy, but depending on your personal needs, they're not really that essential. If you do consider them essential, however, you'll just need a larger battery system. And then right in the middle, we have things like an electric stove, water heater, and heating if you use mini splits. These are appliances that still use a lot of electricity, but you don't use them very often, and they are pretty important. So in the next slide, we have a chart to help you decide how many batteries you may need to power your home. So this is something you don't have to worry about screenshotting this. We have 2 slides here that when we make this presentation available, you can kind of get an idea here. But essentially on this chart, more of an FYI, it assumes how much service you can get from a battery per appliance that's listed here. So on this slide and the next one, we have just a list of common household appliances and electronics and things like that, and how much service you can get from one relatively small battery system based on the size of these devices and the load. So like in the first item on the list, refrigerator, typically on average, it's about 400 watts of load. And the service from one 13.5 kilowatt hour battery system will get you about 34 hours of service just for that one fridge. So if all you care about is running your fridge and all you care about is having a day and a half of backup power, one small to medium battery pack will do it for you. But when you start adding in other things like fans, probably not EV charging, but a freezer, running your laptop, a couple of lights, a microwave, that'll start to add up, and then you can kind of add up those loads, and then you can multiply it times the number of hours of backup you want, and then you can find how many kilowatt hours of backup you'll really need. So this might be a little too into the weeds for some people. This is something that a contractor can certainly help you out with once you start that process of meeting with contractors and deciding what's right for you. So we'll jump ahead 2 slides to the storage versus generator. Okay. All right, so battery storage versus generators. So we have some highlights here to help describe why batteries might be a better option. So portable generator, the one that you wheel out of your shed once or twice a year when you need it. Obviously, it's in low upfront cost, it's affordable, it's pretty accessible, unless you need to buy one the day before a storm. They're portable, they're, I'll say relatively easy to use, but depending on who you ask and what kind of generator you have, sometimes they could be a pain to use. So next, on the kind of full-time standby backup generator, something like a Generac system, these can have a high output. They can have 20, 30 kilowatts of power, which can easily power your whole house. They can charge your electric car if you need to. Plenty of power. They run on natural gas or propane, which if you already have at your home, relatively easy to hook up or have a professional hook up, of course. And they're always on standby. So they have some technology in there, some software that'll keep them monitoring the grid. And if the connection goes down, it'll automatically disconnect, and most of the time you won't even notice that the power is switched over. And now onto the benefits of batteries. If you click next, there you go. So batteries, they're silent. They don't make any noise. They don't have any moving parts. No fuel, no emissions, which most of the time your neighbors will thank you because they're silent and they don't stink. You can store and use your own solar PV energy. And click, I think, once or twice more. They're always on standby, just like a standby generator, of course. And the biggest benefit that none of these have, except for batteries, is that incentives are available. So there's a way that you can get kind of similar benefits to having a standby generator, but for a lot cheaper. So next slide, please. So drawbacks, because we're being fair here. With a portable generator, the drawbacks are numerous. You have to buy and transport fuel. They're loud, they stink. They release all kinds of noxious fumes, and if you're not safe, it can be very dangerous. They require maintenance because it's a little motor, and you just have to keep those up every once in a while. And they're not on standby, so you have to actually cart it out of your shed and hook it up when the power goes out. Let's see, a couple of clicks. Standby generator, great to have, but they're very expensive because they're expensive to buy, install, and you still have to buy fuel for them, whether it's through your propane that you have delivered every couple of months or through a natural gas line that you have at your home. When it's running, it's got to have fuel and you got to pay for it. Needs professional installation with a fuel hookup, needs permitting, requires maintenance, and it's not portable because it has to be installed on a concrete pad. And finally, because we're being fair here, batteries, biggest drawback for them is going to be the upfront cost, which we try to make a little more attractive with our incentives that I've been teasing for a couple of slides. They do require a professional installation. We have a list of eligible contractors, of course. They require not only permitting, but also interconnection because they are a grid interactive piece of equipment. So it's going to be not only taking power from the grid when it's charging or taking power from your solar panels, but it's also going to be sending that power back out to the grid. So it's exporting. And that's actually how the incentive program works, is that the battery has to be configured so that it can send its power off to the grid. And finally, they're not really very portable. So now on to the benefits and the other reason why we're all here today, to talk about incentives. So next slide, please. So the residential upfront incentive levels are on the screen here. There is some discussion right now about extending some of these rates beyond their existing 10 megawatt capacity block, just because we're not seeing as much pickup in underserved and low income markets. But we'll talk about the current rate for right now. So there's two types of incentives in this program. There's an upfront incentive, which is just cash off the top, money that you don't have to pay. For those familiar with the solar program that the Green Bank ran years ago, it works the same way as buying solar panels. So there's total cost, there's a rebate, and then that rebate just comes right off the top and you don't have to worry about paying it. The second type of incentive, which is different from the solar program in that you can actually get both incentives, is the performance-based incentive, and that's for what's called active dispatch. So on the upfront incentive, the incentive levels will go in steps similar to solar rebates based on the approved total capacity. Right now, we've got plenty of capacity left in the first block, so these rates aren't going to be changing anytime soon. But for standard rate customers, you would get an upfront incentive of $200 per kilowatt hour of energy in the battery. So if you have a 20 kilowatt hour battery system, that's $4,000 off the total cost. If you are a customer in an underserved community, and we have a list of who qualifies for that, but essentially it's the Department of Economic and Community Development, DECD. They have a list of what's called distressed municipalities. It's about 20 to 30 towns in Connecticut, and they are towns that just meet a number of criteria in terms of, income, job, education opportunities, all kinds of things like that. So those are towns that are kind of, they're considered distressed in that they need a little extra boost. So we have a 50% adder for those customers. So that's $300 per kilowatt hour of capacity. And then low income. So certain customers that qualify as low income, if you qualify for HES income eligible, we have a full list that's all slipping my mind right now of various Connecticut programs that if you qualify for these, you'll qualify for the low income rebate. And that's 100% adder. So it can be a pretty generous upfront incentive. It is capped at $7,500 per residential unit. So, maximum of $7,500 off the upfront cost of the battery. And next we have the performance incentive, which it's a little harder to explain, but I do have a couple of examples in the next few slides. But essentially the performance incentive pays based on how your battery performs every summer or winter season. And these apply to all customers the same way. And basically, you make your battery available for the utility to basically take power out of your battery and send it off to the grid on those really hot summer days, like in that earlier chart where I showed the fast peaking power plants are getting ready to get fired up, and energy is going to be really expensive and really dirty that day. The plan is that we would have batteries that can be on standby, and when they're charged, we can call on them to dispatch that energy off to the grid, and that energy will help us avoid that dirty, expensive power. And the trade-off is that in exchange for that, we pay you, and when you don't need it, or when the grid doesn't need it, you have backup power. So that's what you get in energy storage solutions. So next slide, please. So I'll get into how the dispatching schedule works. And when I say dispatching, I'm referring to the utility controlling your battery and discharging it to use to help make the grid more stable. So we'll have a few sample calculations in the next few slides, but we just want to establish kind of what the program looks like. So in exchange for that upfront incentive, you would, for 10 years in the summertime, on June, July, and August, for any non-holiday weekdays, your battery would be pre-programmed to discharge its capacity to your home's use during the day. So between 3 and 8 p.m., if you have 10 kilowatt hours of power of energy in your battery, it would be pre-programmed to discharge 80% of that, so 8 kilowatt hours of power or of energy, excuse me, to meet the needs of your home. So in doing that, it lowers your home's demand during those times, and it would only do that on non-holiday weekdays. So we'll make it a little more complicated here in the next slide by adding in these active dispatch events. So anytime that there's an active dispatch, which for us would be, say, a very hot summer day where we predict that a lot of people are going to be running AC and there's going to be a lot of demand on the grid, we would send a notice for those events and cancel any passive dispatch for the day. And instead of discharging 80% of your battery over 5 hours, we would discharge 100% of your battery over 3 hours. So in that case, you would get this notice that there's going to be an active event scheduled for, we'll say, the 3rd, the 4th, 5th, and you would actually have the opportunity to decline that event if you didn't want to participate in that active event, but it would end up lowering your overall performance incentive for that season. So it's important to be aware of that. And so next slide, please. We'll show even more complicated how this works when we have storms. So in the summertime, there's hurricanes, there's big thunderstorms that knock the power out. We've all experienced that. And we don't want people to be without backup power because we use their batteries, the day before. So that's something that we're very aware of and we don't want to happen. So on this schedule here, you can see the sunny days and the stormy day. So on Wednesday the 4th, we would, if there was a storm predicted for the 5th, the utility would cancel any events that would impact your ability to have backup power just in case the power went out. So it would need to be a big enough storm, and of course you'd have to have some advance notice. So we haven't had one of these events happen yet, but as we go on in the next seasons, we'll certainly pay close attention to the weather and to if and when we need to cancel an event. So our priority really is resilience here, to make sure that customers who are kind enough to let us use their batteries in exchange for an incentive, that they're not literally left in the dark in the event of an outage. So next slide, please. We'll get into an example. Actually, go one more to the medium-size battery. So we'll get into a few examples here of what you can expect for a incentive for participating in this program. Actually, and now that I'm looking at the bottom of the slide here, it says the federal ITC does not apply to standalone systems. It actually does now. So with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act a month or so ago, the federal investment tax credit is actually 30% now, so it's gone up, and it does apply to standalone battery systems. So in all cases, you can assume, as long as you as a homeowner, as a person, have the tax appetite to qualify for an incentive, that you can receive that full value of the federal tax credit. So for here, we'll go over a pretty typical battery system that we've seen in our program so far. So this is a battery system with 12 kilowatts of power, 26 kilowatt hours of energy, and costs on average about $35,000 before any incentives. So for a standard rate customer, this would yield about a $5,200 upfront rebate. Underserved and low income would be capped out at $7,500. And assuming that your battery is participating, as much capacity as possible in every single event over the summer and winter for 10 years, which, again, we're kind of looking at the maximum here, as opposed to necessarily the average. But, you can expect somewhere, close to $10,000 of total incentives, of performance incentives for a battery like this over a 10-year period. So, That is paid out over the 10-year period, and it's paid out twice a year for those 10 years. But it can be pretty attractive when you combine that $5,200 with $10,000 to $12,000 of performance incentives and a 30% federal tax credit on top of that, if you're eligible. So, you can see pretty quickly how, if you're penciling this out versus a large standby generator that runs on natural gas, this can be a pretty attractive option, especially if you have solar panels. This battery, this is a medium-sized battery. In Connecticut, the average home uses about 25 to 30 kilowatt hours of energy a day. This battery has 26 kilowatt hours of energy in it. So, especially if you're considering that you have PV that can recharge it and you're only having it hooked up to critical loads, that can keep you pretty comfortable in many cases. And then we'll just jump to the next one. This is less common, but this is a large battery system. So the only difference here that you can see, of course, it certainly costs more. It's going to max out the incentive at any level. And the 10-year PBI will definitely be higher. And in that case, a larger battery, you may find it easier to participate fully in every event because your home is not using it as much. So, your battery, if you have a larger one, you may be able to keep it topped off more often. So, but again, this is not a typical size battery. This is pretty large. This is overkill for most homeowners. So now I'm going to turn it over to Emma to go into how to get started and how to participate in ESS.
Great, thanks so much, Ed. All right, so now that Ed gave you the background on the program, I'm going to let you know how to get started. Okay, so how to participate. I'm sure many of you have been to our website already, but if you are unaware, it is www.energystoragect.com. So you can find a lot of resources there. So specific to homeowners, we have a homeowners tab that has some basic information about the program, including incentive levels. And it also has a FAQ. So if you are curious about that, we have some good questions and answers there. So that's just if in case you need more background on the program, and you can always email us as well. So the next step is to find a contractor or talk to your solar contractor. So if you already have an existing solar system, our recommendation is always to go back to your previous solar installer and inquiry about battery installations. So that's just in case if your solar system is leased, you don't want to void any warranties there. And they also might have the best insight into what battery would pair best with your existing solar system. So we have a list of eligible contractors on our website. So that tab, Find a Contractor, we have it broken out there by residential, C&I, and then contractors that offer both, so residential and C&I. So just check out that residential table as well as the both table. And there's not as much structure there, so it's just kind of a basic list right now, but we are working on developing the website to make it more interactive for you and make it easier to make your decision there when you're selecting a contractor. So that's something to look forward to in the future. And then next, do your research. So think about what you would like backed up. So your essentials, so those slides that Ed showed, how much time you can back up each of your devices. So if you have just some general knowledge on that, you can kind of prioritize based on how much time and demand each resource takes. And then lastly, get a home energy solution audit. So this is an audit. It's an energy audit. If you went through our previous residential solar incentive program, you likely already had this energy audit done. So essentially, somebody will just come through your house and will let you know if you should update anything to make your home more energy efficient. So if your windows are old and if it's letting in a lot of cool air, then you have to produce more electricity. So just some efficiency parameters there. Next, this is our list of eligible residential technologies. So this is, I just updated this today. So this is as of today. And you can find this entire list on that link above on our website. And so Generac, SunPower, and Enphase, those are the 3 batteries that are fully approved for the program. So the difference between being pre-approved and fully approved is that they are already integrated with our software platform. So the remaining 4 batteries on there, electric, Kohler, Endure Energy, and Home Grid, so they're just in that process of integrating with our software. So that's why they don't have that final approval yet. And you'll see that broken out on that link above as well. So that's something that I'm sure your contractor should have better insight into, but as a homeowner, it's good to just kind of go in with an idea of knowing that these 3 batteries are fully approved. Okay, and with that, we'll jump into questions. All right, so we'll start off with the most asked question about the Tesla Powerwall.
I knew it. So great question. Probably the most common question that we get here is, when can I install a Tesla Powerwall? So we've been talking with Tesla for 10 months now. We originally wanted to have them pre-approved in the program because they work in a similar program managed by Eversource called Connected Solutions. Connected Solutions is similar to ESS, although it does not offer an upfront incentive because it doesn't have that passive dispatch protocol that we have. So it's less of an incentive, just a different program. So the Powerwall is approved in Connected Solutions, but it's not approved in ESS. We have been working with Tesla for many months to encourage them, do everything short of forcing them to apply. And at this point, they still have not given us a timeline, and they haven't given us really any indication that they plan to apply anytime soon. So they had for several months been telling us, yes, we plan to apply, just not right now. And those discussions have changed a little bit lately. So at this point, we are telling customers, certainly work with your contractor, because contractors have an ear to the ground, especially if they're a Tesla dealer. But kind of the short answer is, if you want a Powerwall, unfortunately, it's probably not going to be through this program, Energy Storage Solutions, anytime very soon. It is still eligible for Connected Solutions, but you will miss out on the upfront incentive. So if the incentive is important to you, we recommend going with another piece of equipment that was on the list on the previous slide. But if you really want a Powerwall, it's either wait until maybe Tesla applies or forego that upfront incentive and just get a performance incentive with Connected Solutions. So it's not the answer that we want to give. It's disappointing to us that it couldn't have gone easier than that, but that is where we are for right now, unfortunately. I probably answered about 10 questions.
Yes, definitely. Thanks for the update. Okay, so the next question is more so just a clarification. So even if your town is underserved and you as an individual do not qualify as distressed, so it goes based off of your community. So if your town is marked as distressed, then you will qualify for that underserved. It doesn't need to be personally you.
Yep. And that list does change annually, and we do keep track of it. So I think, for example, if you live in Bridgeport but you make $1 million a year, you would still qualify for the underserved incentive because of the location of it. And it's mainly because customers in those areas, tend to fall within a certain, economic band. So.
Great. And so somebody asked, what happens when you sell your home with the performance incentive?
That's a good question. So we do have a transfer, uh, what's the word, process. So if you do sell your home, same thing with if you have solar panels on your home and you sell it, you're going to have to transfer something, whether it's just the account name so that the new homeowner can receive those incentives from the utility. It'll be the same with the battery. So you would want to inform the Green Bank, the program administrators, that you're leaving or that you're moving, and we can work with the new owners to transfer any of the benefits into their name if they're taking on ownership of the equipment. If the equipment is not owned by the homeowner, for example, if it's leased, then those incentives would be going to a leasing company, to the third party owner of the system to begin with. So all that work would really just be between you, the leasing company, and the new owner.
Great. And this is a very good question we have coming up next. So how big is the storm event to trigger cancellation? What happens when customers experience storms that provide outages, but wasn't enough to trigger a storm event by the utility's perspective?
That is an excellent question. And we haven't experienced that yet because our only dispatches for this season were at the end of September, and it was pretty nice weather that time. So the threshold currently, and for connected solutions, the threshold for a storm event is something where Eversource or UI, they do have meteorologists on staff. When they call an event, that for them is something that merits the utility going into, I think they call it storm preparedness mode or something, where they have employees that go into action, either monitoring light poles or calling out-of-state contractors to work with tree service and linemen and things like that. So it's going to be for those larger storm events. And I know that there are highly localized, these like mini kind of supercell events that happen on a local level. And those, sometimes there's just not enough time to predict them. And at this time, the program will cancel events on a statewide basis, as opposed to knowing that there's a tornado watch in Litchfield, but it's going to be sunny in Fairfield. It's going to be statewide. So when these small events happen, or even if something like, say, car accident or something like that might knock out power, those events can't always be predicted. So that's a good point, and it is a consideration. It's something that we continuously will monitor, because we do have an annual review period every year where we have to report back to the state regulators, to PURA, on the performance of the program and essentially the satisfaction of customers in the program. So if there are significant events where customers are left without any backup power, that's something that we want to know about and something that we would want to make better. So.
Great. Okay, so next question is, please comment on the safety of lithium batteries. So I can take this one, Ed.
Sure.
So every single battery technology that is eligible for the program has to submit an extensive new technology application. It's about 8 pages long. They need to respond to all of our questions. So some are just essential, meeting our scheduling requirements, but there is a huge safety aspect to it. So there are such things as a UL listing and certification for a battery. So essentially they have to go through a certified testing facility that will take their batteries, put them in all sorts of bad conditions. They'll beat them with a hammer. They'll try to light them on fire. And so they'll kind of measure how the battery can resist all of that damage. And so once they pass that, they'll receive the certificate for the listing. So we require 3 different UL listings. One is specific to fire safety, and then the other 2 are specific to the general safety of the battery and inverter. And so we definitely take that into account, and we take that seriously. So that's something that we won't allow a battery to participate without that certification.
Great. And I should also add that your installer should be aware of any local or state fire safety regulations, permitting regulations, and zoning with regards to the battery. For example, if you're putting it in your garage, you might not want to put it right where your car pulls in, because if you hit it, that could cause an issue. So, you know, installing it in a place where it's not going to accidentally get hit with something, or, you know, it can be, it's not sitting in the sun or sitting in the rain all day. So those are important aspects too that are not only part of permitting, but also part of the manufacturer's recommendations.
Great. Okay, so this question is one contractor preferred over the others? So I alluded to before building out our contractor searching portal. So right now, again, it's just those tables listed out by the contractor in alphabetical order. Eventually, we'll add some filters onto there, so you'll be able to select a contractor within your home certain radius. If you prefer somebody local, you'll be able to filter based on whether they do just standby or standalone batteries, or if it's paired with solar. And so eventually, hopefully within the next few months, we'll have that built out. So that's something where you can kind of filter out based on your preferences there. And then another thing that we will have in the future is in kind of insight into what we've seen so far in our applications. So we'll have basically this Power BI report that will show how many contractors have submitted applications. So we'll show their average, the number of applications that they submit, the average cost of the systems. And so we'll have better insight there, so you can kind of take time to analyze that broken out too. So again, this is something that will happen probably early 2023. Okay, so a couple questions here. Oh, and what can I do if a contractor that installed my solar system is not on the list of approved contractors for ESS? So you can either send them Ed and I's contact information, or just our general email inbox, or you can select a different eligible contractor from our list. So if you prefer them, then we can help them finish that application to become an eligible contractor. But otherwise, you can reach out to a couple other ones. Yeah, so the website again is www.energystorageCT, as in the abbreviation for Connecticut.com. So just add that in. And then a couple questions about battery storage interacting with a generator. So do you recommend having both, or how would they react in that scenario?
All right. Well, that I am not an electrician, so it's definitely possible. We've seen people have battery backup, solar PV, and and a generator. So at that point you're having like 4 points of interconnection to your panel. But it's possible. Is it recommended? I think if you already have, say, a standby generator, um, and your purpose there is for resilience, it's probably not worth your while to want to add battery backup. Just speaking honestly, and from a resilience perspective, you kind of have it already. So maybe it's not that the clean technology that's smart and interactive with your PV system like you might want. But if you have something that works, that provides backup for you, um, it's probably not the best idea. Like you don't need to get batteries, but if you really want to, you certainly can. Not to discourage you, of course.
Okay, so does the battery, what is the average lifetime of the battery?
That's a good question. It's going to depend on the chemistry, and because even though these are all lithium-ion batteries we're talking about, there's different types of lithium uh, technology. I would look into each battery's individual warranty. We do require that they have at least a 10-year warranty on the battery, but that does not have a specification over how much the batteries can degrade over time. So as we all know, your iPhone battery after 2 years doesn't stay charged as long as it did on the first day, and the same goes for EVs and for these types of batteries as well. So they all have a 10-year warranty, so they will, they're warranted to continue working. But the truth is, this is a new technology, so we don't really know what it's going to look like in 15 or 20 years. But we also don't know how easily it will be to recycle one and how cheap it will be to get a new one at that point. So that does come with the territory of new technology. We're just getting into the time that we're seeing people that have had what we consider modern solar panels for 10 years, and seeing how those perform. So if you've had solar for a while, you might be one of those people that's an early adopter, and you're willing to kind of see. But we don't know what the lifespan beyond 10 years would be.
Great. So is there any information on equipment versus installation costs? So you'll be able to see this a bit more once we build out that report that I had mentioned before, but just from generally what we've seen, it's pretty similar and standard across most equipment. There's no one battery that's more expensive than the others. It's pretty standard. I think including installation costs. So what we've seen is a lot of systems paired with solar. So I think the installation cost there kind of includes the cost of solar as well. So we don't have as much insight into that. But generally I would say it's the same across all equipment. Okay, let's see. Another question. So Ed, can you please discuss the federal tax credit you had mentioned?
Ooh, I can, but I will have the caveat that I am not a tax accountant, and this is not tax advice. If you really need to dig into it, I would recommend consulting with an accountant. But the way that it works is similar, or really the same way as solar PV. So it was recently, in September, with the IRA passing, it was expanded to include standalone battery storage, so battery storage installed without solar panels. And the rate has gone back up from, I think it was at 22% or 26%, and it went back up to 30%, which is the rate where it was a couple of years ago. So the way that we've always guided people for what to expect from the tax credit is that you'll take the total cost that you paid for that system. So say it was $30,000, and if there was any upfront rebate, we'll say it's $3,000. You would use the net cost, in that case, $27,000, to find your federal tax credit. So it would be 30% of the net, so $27,000. So that's what you would report, to claim that tax credit. And the way that works is, you would file that at the end of the year, and then, assuming you had enough of that tax appetite, then it would offset your tax bill for that year.
Great, good to know. And then running out of time, so we'll make this our last question. So how long does the approval process take place? And assuming this means for a project application.
Do you want to take that one, Emma?
Yeah, sure. So before we even begin to review your project, we need to confirm that it is an approved equipment. So that list that I had showed before, if you are installing any equipment that's outside of that list, we'll need to receive that new technology application first. So given that, we'll give an example that you are installing a Generac battery, so it's already approved. We'll review it within 2 weeks of the contractor submitting it. And if there are deficiencies in the application, say the contractor forgot to upload a document, or they uploaded the wrong customer's document, or there was a discrepancy between the system size between documents, we'll have to reject the application. And the intention of rejecting an application is to eventually have it approved. We just need to get those corrections before we can approve it. So I would say generally within 2 weeks, and contractors are very responsive about getting those corrections in as well. So once we send out that approval, the initial approval is the reservation of funds. And so that reservation of funds goes out to you, the homeowner, and your contractor. So you'll know once that approval is completed, because you will receive an email there. All right. I think that's a good place to leave off.
All right. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Rudy, and thanks to everyone for joining. We will have a copy of this presentation recording made available on that energystorageCT.com website. And if you navigate there, you'll find a link to download the slides and the recording probably sometime next week. So with that, thanks everyone, and have a great night.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone.